Hi everyone, and welcome back to Parkitect. Today we'll be exploring Victoria Lake. With a flat, empty land and ample space for expansion, the surrounding area of Victoria Lake lends itself perfectly for a recreational destination. It is your task to turn this beautiful nature setting into a lakeside amusement park. The scenario has a couple goals, with at least 300 guests in your park, no loan debts, that's going to be tough, and then a couple optional goals of having 100 guests in your park and 200 guests in your park, so you'll probably get those pretty quickly. And then to complete the 100 and 200 guest marks by September of year 2. Well, I have a couple ideas of the way I want to go with this, and I might have hinted at it at the last episode, so let's hop right in. So although I accidentally skipped this park, I actually was really looking forward to trying to work on it, for honestly a number of reasons. Number one being the last park, I know it was like the follow-up to this one, but it was incredibly challenging. I mean, it took a significant amount of time to not only build and make the park feel fleshed out, but also just leaving it on like times 3 speed and trying to rebuild, the economy of the park so that I had enough money to build rides to get to the guest limit. Because 500 guests or 500 concurrent guests and then 800 total guests is a lot to shoot for. This is significantly easier with a lot less restrictive objectives. I mean, there is the one that is you can't have any loans out, which I thought would be challenging because I took out 2 loans right away on the last park, and then I was out of luck basically the rest of the time. My finances were just dumpstered. But this time it was super easy. I try to keep that in mind, and maybe I was more mindful with my money. I was significantly more careful. And so I tried not to do too terribly much building, which as you can see here, I was placing a lot of parts, so I was kind of nervous right off the gate. But I think I did a pretty good job of mixing how much money I was spending trying to get decoration done on things, and then getting a fair number of rides. That's the other thing that I've really gained, which is that I know how many rides I need to make the park successful. In order to get guests in the park, you need a ton of rides, and specifically thrill rides. I mean, it is help to have a couple different casual rides like the carousel or the Ferris wheel or things of that nature, things that are easier for guests that don't like the intense rides, although some of the rides that they say are like intense or medium intensity really aren't that bad, like Twister. Twister is not that bad of a ride. But those are the kinds of rides you need in the park to make money. And so now that I've done a few episodes and I have that kind of experience under my belt, at least I can slowly build my way through the finances. So that's kind of nice. We think we started with 18,000. That sounds right. And yeah, if looking at my screen, I'm at like 17,000 right now. So 18,000 is definitely the right number. And I probably used 4,000 of it on props and stuff. So as the episodes get more challenging, maybe I try to save some of like the props and building dynamics for like later on and just focus on the rides up front to get the finances. Then I never have to stress about it. I'm not sure if that would make the episode any less interesting to watch, but that might be the best play. Now backtracking a little bit, since I kind of went on a really, interesting tangent, is that the number 2 reason why I was excited to work on this park is this is the first park that Silverette made, at least for Parkitect. So if you don't know who Silverette is, he's a really big, and maybe the biggest, at least the one that I've watched the most, roller coaster video game? I guess roller coaster genre video games YouTuber. He does Parkitect videos, Planet Coaster videos. He did Roller Coaster Tycoon videos back in the day, and I think he actually had one recently. And he's significantly more talented at both just, I guess he has a significantly higher knowledge base of parks. We'll start with that one first. And then he also is just a lot more talented in architecture. I'm not sure what his major is because I know that he was in uni, but his skill set is significantly higher than mine. So after I'm done with my episodes, I'll generally go and watch his. That way I'm like not getting caught up on like what he built and like, oh, I gotta match that. But I can kind of, look back and say, all right, maybe with these pieces, this kind of architecture would be better. And I never try to copy like one for one on anything, but you definitely draw inspiration from places. So it helps going back and looking at what he's done, and then also looking at some what other YouTubers have done, and just going and finding other parks from like that kind of area. So like the Western themes, going through and looking at parks that had those Western themes really helps for the next time that I'll be doing a Western park, because I'm fairly certain there's going to be other scenarios that have like deserts or, Western themed aspects. And, the same will apply for this one eventually, because this main street here is very Disney-esque. There's a couple different buildings later on that I get to that are more European style. And so I'm not sure the park really fits like one cohesive unit, because there's definitely different architectures. And since I don't really know which architecture types are which, sometimes they kind of get blended together and meld, and that can either turn out really, really well or it can turn out bad and offend people. So definitely not what I'm trying to do. But hopefully, if I ever mess up and say like it's the wrong architecture style or something, someone can comment and let me know. And then going forward, I will have that down. I'll have a notebook that I'll just start writing and jotting notes down on which architects, styles are which. But this is one of my favorite buildings that I made, at least up front. I really like the thin, narrow one, which I put the bathrooms in, because it has a lot of that almost like Tudor-ish detail, even though it's not like white stucco with like the brown detailing. It's kind of like the flipped opposite way. It's just nice because it's like a thin building. You can stick the restrooms in, and then you can have like the bigger, more prominent Main Street buildings on the left and the right. The reason why I was so excited for this was when I was looking up inspiration, I found multiple like drawings that people have made. I'm not sure if they're official drawings. My guess is they're probably not. They're probably some artist, their interpretation of like Disney's Main Street. So they actually had gigantic posters that were laid out with all the different buildings in Disney's. It was Disney World. I don't know if it was Disney World Paris, or maybe it's Disneyland Paris, so it would have to be Disney World Orlando. I'm going to go with it was Orlando and just stick with that for now. So I think when the last time that I was at Disney World was when I was 10 or 11. So you'll have to forgive me because my understanding of which buildings, are where is just really lackluster. I don't remember there being that many buildings, but they had so many buildings in this drawing, and it really helped to take inspiration from a couple of them and then just modify it to make it my own. So like this building here, I love arcades. I don't really go to them too terribly much when I'm at theme parks. Like I'll walk through them because I'm a huge Dave & Buster's fan and just a huge video game fan in general, which I'm sure most of you are as well. So looking at arcades when you're going to parks is pretty cool, but I've never been one to just go sit in them, because if you're at a theme park, right, you can always go to an arcade some other place. And the arcades are incredibly expensive. You already paid a significant amount of money to go sit in a theme park, or well, hopefully not sit, go do things in the theme park. And if you're going to just spend extra money on, arcade games that you go to for free at like a Scene 75 or Dave & Buster or something like that, you're just wasting your time. At least that's my opinion. It's fun to walk through, so I can't judge anybody for what they like to do. If you like going to the arcade when you're at, Kings Island, Cedar Point, Six Flags, more power to you. But since I love arcades, I had to include one here. And although the flowers on the top of the balcony don't really make too much sense because I never added a door, I like the overall look of it, and I'm happier with that building than I was with one here in a second. But until then, I'll go back to my third point of why I like this map so much. And that's that although there's other theme parks that are centered around lakes, I think the one that will always stand out to me is Geauga Lake. I kind of hinted at it in the last episode, and I hinted at it a little bit during my introduction, but Geauga Lake has an incredibly special place in my heart. Unfortunately, I never went. I went to Cedar Point very frequently growing up. My aunt actually was one of the characters at Cedar Point, so we went all the time. I went to Kings Island fairly frequently, and Kings Island actually wasn't owned by Cedar Fair when I was a kid, so it had all like the Nickelodeon theming. And I remember that one of the times while I was at, I think it was like the Rugrats ride. I can't remember if it was Reptar Escape. I really wish I knew the name, but I was gonna go on like my first like major ride at that park, but I got super, super, super scared because some lady passed out and vomited all over the train. And after we had waited like an hour in line, we had to get off. And after that, I'm like, if I wait an hour in line for this, and this lady who is a lot older than me is passing out and puking, I can't do big rides. Like, nope, nope, nope. My uncle actually made me go on, I think it was the Beast. I think Son of the Beast had been taken down by that point. So it had to have been the Beast. And I love the Beast now. I'll get on like 15 times in a row. But as a kid, I have a picture, and it's one of like my favorite pictures in like my scrapbooks that my mom made for me. And it's me and my uncle, him laughing and just staring at me while me being petrified. I don't know how old I was. I had to have been under 10, maybe 8. So I was probably just tall enough to make it on the ride, and definitely not emotionally mature. Although you see some people that are like super super young going on these huge rides, and then as a 24-year-old right now, it makes me feel so embarrassed that I'm too nervous to go on them. But again, to each his own. And now back from that long tangent back to Geauga Lake. Although I didn't get to go to Geauga Lake, I did so many projects on it in late elementary school, high school, and even college, because it's such an interesting point in time for not only Ohio, because Ohio had 3 ginormous theme parks in it, but it's also an insane, almost like a sad point in time for coaster enthusiasts. Definitely for the people that was a large source of income from travel to that area, because I know that the area around Geauga Lake is not that dense and not very populated, so there was a lot of people that would come and travel to that, and it makes it tough with Cedar Point, Kings Island, and Geauga Lake all being very very close together. But that's ultimately why it got shut down. But to have the largest theme park in the world at one point in time, towards its later years when Six Flags had owned it, it was, I think, a 700 acres seems really small, but maybe not. Maybe it's hard to really understand what the size of an acre is when I haven't thought about it for a while. But I think 700 acres is right. And that was, at the time, the largest theme park in the world, because they combined SeaWorld Ohio with, which was Geauga Lake. So I think it was like wild animals or wild rides and wild something, that whatever they named the SeaWorld aspect of it. So I mean, to close down a park of that magnitude is sad for Geauga Lake. But this ride that I'm working on right now, and I better start talking about it before I build half the park, is very very similar to one of the most iconic wooden coasters that was at Geauga Lake. Big Dipper, which I'm sure some of you have heard that name before, was the last standing ride at Geauga Lake after everything was closed down. It was a really simple coaster too. It was very much just air hill after air hill, or airtime after airtime, all that good stuff. And just a simple out and back coaster. And it was left for a long time abandoned. And I don't know if it was in 2018 or 2017, but just recently, I mean 3 years, but that's still recent enough, they finally tore it down. There were actually quite a fair number of attempts to get it moved to somewhere else to try to get support, because a lot of people had thought that was very iconic and a ride that should be, not memorialized, but taken care of a little bit better than it had a really sad ending. So, whereas all the other rides in the park were basically either torn down and sold for scrap for dirt cheap, or transplanted to other parks. Not Flight of Fear, but one of the big rides at Kings Island that just got replaced so that they could put the new Giga Coaster in, was actually transplanted from Geauga Lake. I wish I was better at names, but my brain always seems to evade me when I need it the most. It was at least if I can explain it, it was the flying coaster. So almost like Superman, but Flight of Fear was indoors. What was the name of that? I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was really sad. I think if I would have been more of a coaster enthusiast back then, I'm not sure how I would have handled it. Because, I got salty that Cedar, Cedar Fair, this is going down another tangent, but that Cedar Fair shrunk. Well, not necessarily shrunk, but they would not allow Orion to be taller than Millennium Force. And I don't know, maybe there was actually some height restrictions around like the Mason area, and that's why they didn't go any higher. But I'm fairly certain that it was only like definitely less than 50 feet. But I'm thinking within like 20 feet of like the record for the tallest Giga Coaster. And I know that they own both parks and they want Cedar Point to be the coaster capital of the world, but they easily could have added that extra height. They were already there working on it. They already had they could have made the plans just a little bit taller to take in, the fastest Giga Coaster and the tallest Giga Coaster. I know that they could have done it if they wanted to. So when they first released Orion, I know that in the coaster community, that was definitely some backlash received there. Because if you're going to put a new Giga Coaster in, you might as well at least take one record. But I guess that's only something that Cedar Point gets to do. It's definitely the favorite child of the brand. I do like Cedar Fair quite a bit, but and like I mentioned before, having 3 parks all owned by the same company, that's why they definitely bought it out. Because Jago Lake had 4 different owners, or maybe 5 even, because it was once a family park, which is probably what, at my stage, this park that I'm having here is at. It's probably that transition between when it was started off as like a family park and when it started being bought by more, I would say, mid-scale corporations that, could handle a little bit more debt to expand. Because honestly, the park was in debt most of the time that was active. And I think that's basically where my park is in that kind of stance. And I lost track of where I was, but I think Cedar Fair probably could have handled it differently. I'm not sure how they could have, because they had false promise after false promise to like the people around Jago Lake. Originally, they said that they were going to keep the park open, but that didn't last very long. They tore out SeaWorld pretty quickly because Six Flags actually kept the rights to own the animals when they sold it, because they were actually both in debt. So Six Flags is trying to get out of debt, so they sold the park to Cedar Fair, and then Cedar Fair was realizing the park was too expensive, and so they completely cut off the animal side of Wild Kingdoms. That was the name. I finally remember. They stuck a water park there. There was a smaller water park actually on like the front end side of the lake. So if you think about like how the park map is, I'm not very zoomed out right now on the screen, but the front part of the lake was more of the rides and the amusement side, and the back side was the Animal Kingdom, or Wild Kingdom as they called it. So they tore that all down and then put the water park on that side. And pretty quickly after they did that, out goes the theme park. There goes the rides for scrap, transferring them out. They left the Dipper, the poor wooden coaster, just to sit there, abandoned. And then they promised them that the water park would stand. Well, as you might have guessed, the water park was there for, I think, 3 years before that was gone too. And I've looked up recently, and I'm fairly certain that almost 95 or like 90% of the land is still unused. They've torn down all the structures except for like a few buildings that are slowly being overgrown by nature. It reminds me of that like National Geographic or like History Channel documentary, or that series, like Life After Humans. I mean, that's what most abandoned places are, right? Especially like Six Flags New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina hit. That park, I've seen YouTubers that will sneak into that park, and there's some pretty I mean, it's been looted, unfortunately, and it's been vandalized, which makes it really sad. I wish that, like, the state of the park could have been kept more intact. I'm not sure if the land got foreclosed, and that's why no one takes care of it anymore. I mean, I get that it was torn down, but they could have done something with the land. And I think the same thing with Jaga Lake, but as of right now, it's just basically sitting empty and unused. So it's a very sad reminder of something that used to be really, really cool and no longer is. But after that extremely long story, I now am going to do the coaster station for our wooden coaster. I put it off for a while because I didn't really have much inspiration. The last park, I had to build 3 different stations, and I really wanted this one to not be the same. I'm sure that after multiple episodes, my stations will have to be somewhat similar just because that's how it goes. Even in real life, across like the different chains of parks, there's similarities between things. It's really hard after you have hundreds of coasters, or I mean, I guess that really extends to like anything, right? There will always be similarities between work. There's actually a theory on that when it comes to like, I think it's all things, but definitely movies. Where if you think of like Olympus Has Fallen and White House Down, right? 2 complete different sets of people, and I guarantee you they weren't communicating with each other. I mean, maybe it's Hollywood, so it's smaller, so maybe they were. But the fact that 2 different groups of people come up with the same idea at like a relatively same time and then release it, and it's like so similar but different, right? That's essentially what the coaster stations will be. So some of them will end up being same, some of them will be different. And I was definitely putting off this one because I wanted it to look good, but I wasn't sure exactly where to start. So what I ended up doing was I kind of do what I did with most of my Q paths, which is that I'll take the biggest clump of them, and then stick like a shelter over it. What really started making me want to do it was because it rained all the time on this park. It seems like even in the desert park, it rained all the time, which that's a topic for another day because I absolutely cannot stand rain in video games. I think it's the one thing that I know it adds realism sometimes, but it makes the game lag. It obscures, your point of view. Like it's good from like a gameplay sense sometimes. I really struggle saying that because I don't know if it always makes sense from a gameplay perspective. It makes sense from a, theme park simulator perspective. That's a lot better. Because, obviously the rides can't operate in the rain, which makes it tougher for you because you have to generate money somewhere else while you're waiting on the rides to come back online. So I guess from a simulation point of view, it makes sense. But for the rest of games, it does not get a pass from me. Rain should not exist in games. It only slows FPS down and blocks your vision. Oh, man. But I tried to do something slightly different. So the different sections of the queue, right, are split up a little bit. They're all very basic in terms of like wooden support beams and metal like roofing. But I like the color scheme of it. And it adds a lot of contrast from some of the other queue lines that I made. And now we are adding my favorite ride back in. I told you last episode, or maybe it was 2 parts, 2 episodes now, since the last one split into 2 parts. But the Twister will be in every single one of the episodes that I make. That's how it's going to be. I love that ride. But I also saw, and it's kind of cool because I don't know all the different rides that are in Parkitect Coaster. I don't know Planet Coaster's all either, but I definitely don't know all of the flat rides that are in Parkitect, just because I haven't had the chance to unlock them all yet. I've probably gotten close, but this ride right here, I did not know existed, and I actually, until I watched it, I didn't know how it operated either, because I know that in the description it said it's very similar to Twister, right? Which is that you have the 3 cars in like the Y shape, and it spins around, and it made me think that it was oh gosh, I wish I knew the name, but this one, it doesn't actually have the carts go up and down. The arms go up and down. So the arms go up and down while the whole thing spins clockwise. But there's another variant of this, and maybe someone will know the name of that variant, where while it's spinning clockwise, you're actually like cutting across too. So not only is your, if you can see here, the cars are spinning while the whole thing is spinning, right? But it's all going in the same direction, just really, really quickly. You cut across. So in Twister, that's kind of like one of the bigger things, right? So your carts are spinning, but you're like intersecting almost. Like you're going to one side of the fence and then you're bouncing back to the other side of the fence. And so there's like a third type that's like a mixture between these two. So I wonder if that is in Parkitect. I'll probably forget to look it up, but maybe if someone in the comments knows what in the world I'm talking about after that extremely obscure explanation of it, you can let me know. And now I think we are getting to the final buildings in the park. And when I talked about it earlier, I said that there were some like European style buildings, and these would be the two. The one on the right here, I'm not really sure what architecture style it is, but the one that kind of gets sandwiched between the two, that one's definitely very Greek or Eastern European and Mediterranean style. I guess that is two completely different. There might be some overlapping, but yeah, I'm not sure if actually they're the same or not. Eastern Europe, yeah, it's probably there's partial overlap. I'm gonna go with this partial overlap between the two. So I every single building I tried to really switch up the styling. The one I like the least is actually that brick one, which I kind of skipped over talking about because I just disliked it so much. You know, it's not the worst thing I've ever done, but it definitely is the worst out of the buildings in the park. I did something different with this one though, which is that I had blue detailing, and I think that the color scheme stands out. We're going back to what I said about the three colors. And maybe that's what the reason why I don't like that brick one, because it has like five really. The black roof, white detailing, the brown stucco on the bottom. I said red bricks, right? And then the green like overhangings on the windows. What? Yeah, I think that's five. This one's a lot better. You know, blue and white detailing. So it's kind of like four, but it's good enough. And then here is the Greek one, or the Mediterranean style one. I really like the technique that I started figuring out with the windows. I didn't realize the glass panes for walls were actually thinner than the normal walls, so you can stick them down and then you can like overlap with actual walls. And so although I think that the pre-built windows do add a lot in some spots, especially like for second floors, when the second floor isn't always like a full meter by meter, or however tall the normal wall blocks are. I think it's a meter. So like the smaller windows make more sense like there on the second floor. But for like the bottom floors, when you'd imagine like a shop that you can like look inside to, or like a restaurant that you can look inside, the big open glass windows I think make more sense. And it definitely makes the theme fit better. I do think that this park probably could use a little bit more help. Like I wasn't sold on it originally, but with like the addition of these two buildings and a couple of the stations and the extra rides, I really like how the park turned out. But I don't think it's finished. We definitely complete all the goals. We hit over 300 guests. We actually completed the optional goals on this one, which I was really happy about. But the park it's still lacking a little bit of something. We only have one coaster in it. We have a bunch of flat rides, but it doesn't really feel complete. So if this is something that you would like me to go back to in like a separate episode from the series, like later on and complete, I would definitely be for it. So please let me know about that. And if you do want that, I'll get on it. It's something that I think would be enjoyable, and there's still a lot left that could be done with this park, especially with like the history of why I like it, you know. In addition to that, since we're kind of wrapping up here, Wednesday, I believe, will be my first non-Parkitect video. I'm excited for it. It'll be kind of a surprise. I'm not going to say exactly what it is yet. And it's kind of like a one-off. It's a lot shorter, and it's a different format. But if you do enjoy those kind of other episodes, I think Wednesdays will be my kind of variety day, and Sundays will stick to exclusively Parkitect for now. On Wednesday, you'll have to let me know how you like it. And if you like the format that I'm going with the Parkitect videos, let me know that as well. So, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, leave a comment, let me know what you think, and I will see you on the next one. Later.